Before the first explosion, something strange appears on Ukrainian radar. Not a single missile, not a simple wave of drones, dozens of contacts, then hundreds, moving in patterns that don't make sense until you zoom out. The tracks bend around air defenses, flow along river valleys, split and merge like a thinking organism. Analysts will later call it an algorithmic strike, a swarm designed not just to hit targets, but to learn the map of Ukraine's defenses in real time. So what exactly did Russia test that night, and how much did it discover? Watch to the end to see how this swarm changed the air war over Ukraine. The first wave was almost silent. Thousands of Shahed-type kamikaze drones, modified variants with extended range and hardened warheads, crossed the border in a dispersed pattern designed to overwhelm Ukrainian air defenses. Analysts later described the swarm as algorithmic, adjusting flight paths to bypass known anti-air coverage. For civilians on the ground, the warning came only as a distant buzz, then the vibrating scream of engines descending toward their targets. By 3 a.m., thermal imaging shows explosions ripping through power stations, railway hubs, and water treatment facilities. Russia wasn't aiming for the front line. It wasn't trying to kill soldiers. It was striking something far more fragile: the infrastructure that keeps a country alive in winter. Minutes later, the second wave arrived. This time, louder, faster, and deadlier. Cruise missiles launched from two 95 bombers over the Caspian Sea arced westward, followed by Kalibr and Iskander missiles rising from platforms in occupied Crimea and Russia's Black Sea Fleet. Ukrainian air defense crews went into full saturation mode, firing everything they had: NASAMS, IRIST, S-300, Patriot, even mobile MANPADS. But the numbers were simply too large. Within the hour, the effects were felt across the nation. Power grids destabilized as substations were hit. Entire districts in Kharkiv and Odessa plunged into darkness. Rail lines near Kyiv, the logistical arteries of the war, shuddered as explosions tore through switching stations. In several regions, heating systems failed as temperatures dropped toward freezing. Then, the most alarming report of the night arrived. Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the largest in Europe, lost its off-site electricity connection after a missile strike severed a major transmission line. For nearly an hour, the entire facility ran on emergency diesel generators. It was the closest the plant had come to a radiological risk event since the early months of the war. According to Ukrainian officials, if backup power had failed, cooling systems could have stalled with catastrophic consequences. But this wasn't chaos. It was doctrine. As the scale of the assault became clear, military analysts identified a deliberate Russian strategy: a coordinated winter campaign designed to shatter civilian resilience, overload air defenses, and force Ukraine into an energy crisis just as negotiations intensify in Europe. And it was only the beginning. As dawn broke over Ukraine, the scale of Russia's intent became even clearer. This wasn't a one-night barrage. It was a sustained campaign. By the morning of December 7th, new waves of drones were already incoming, and Ukrainian air defense operators were fighting on almost no sleep. For the first time in months, Russia had synchronized every major strike component it possesses: strategic bombers, naval missile platforms, land-based launchers, and mass-produced Shahed drones. Analysts compared it to the opening days of the 2022 war, but with one critical difference: Russia had learned. Instead of clumsy, high-density volleys, this attack used staggered timing, layered decoys, and unpredictable flight paths. Some drones flew low along river valleys. Others took curved, looping routes across farmlands to ambush radar systems. On several occasions, Ukrainian SAM crews fired first at exposed drones, only to be targeted seconds later by follow-up missiles zeroing in on their radar emissions. This was electronic warfare in motion. Footage released by Ukrainian operators showed Russian drones marked with improvised heat baffles and metallic mesh designed to confuse thermal sensors. Several were modified to drop flares mid-flight, mimicking the signatures of incoming missiles and forcing early interceptions. For every drone shot down, another slipped through. By midday, Russian missile attacks struck key railway hubs near Kyiv and Dnipro, precisely the logistical nodes Ukraine relies on to move ammunition, reinforcements, and humanitarian supplies. Railway officials confirmed structural damage to switching yards and communication lines, temporarily slowing troop movements across the Eastern Front. But the psychological effect was even more profound. Across Ukraine, civilians queued for water as pumping stations failed. Hospitals switched to backup power and began rationing electricity. In Odessa and Kharkiv, emergency crews extinguished fires in residential neighborhoods hit by falling debris. And in several regions, rolling blackouts became the only way to prevent total grid failure. This wasn't just a strike on infrastructure, it was a strike on national stamina. On December 8th, Russia continued its offensive, launching additional drone attacks across Sumy and Poltava. In Sumy alone, at least 7 civilians were injured after a Shahed impacted near a residential building. The attack pushed local authorities to evacuate parts of the district and shut down schools, marking one of the region's worst days in months. Meanwhile, Ukrainian intelligence issued a stark warning. Russia was preparing for more. Satellite imagery showed increased activity at multiple air bases deep inside Russia. 2 95 bombers were being rearmed. Warships in the Black Sea had repositioned. Portable launch units in Bryansk and Belgorod were being refueled and reloaded. It was clear. This was not an isolated operation. This was Russia's winter doctrine unfolding step by calculated step. And Kyiv knew the worst assumption they could make was that the attack was over. For Ukrainian commanders, the question on December 8th was no longer why Russia launched this offensive. The answer was obvious. Winter pressure, negotiation leverage, and an attempt to break the country's backbone without breaking the front line itself. The real question was how long Ukraine could withstand it. Inside Ukraine's Air Force command bunker, officers reviewed the strike patterns. The data revealed an unmistakable escalation curve. Russia had not only increased the number of drones and missiles, it had improved its targeting logic. Substations struck on December 6th were attacked again on December 7th. Repair crews became targets themselves. Every rebuild risked becoming a kill zone. This was Russia's strategic persistence. Hit, wait, watch, hit again. But Ukraine adapted quickly. Mobile air defense groups armed with Stingers, Gepards, and improvised truck-mounted autocannons repositioned constantly, intercepting low-flying drones before they reached urban zones. Firefighters and emergency crews worked without pause, pulling civilians from ruined apartments, restoring water pressure, stabilizing the power grid block by block. In Kyiv, President Zelensky addressed the nation, standing in a dimly lit room powered by generators. His message was blunt. Russia wants darkness. We will not give it to them. But even as he spoke, analysts across NATO warned that this winter campaign was only Phase 1. Phase 2 would come when Ukraine's energy consumption peaked, when temperatures dropped, when the grid was stretched, and when even a minor strike could cause cascading failures. And Phase 3, they warned, could target command and control structures, transport hubs, or defense industry sites, pushing Ukraine toward operational paralysis. The stakes were rising. Late on December 8th, new satellite intelligence showed Russian missile carriers returning to standby positions. 2 95 bombers were taxiing. Black Sea Fleet frigates remained at launch readiness. Ukrainian air defense crews braced again. The pattern was unmistakable. Russia was preparing another blow. But Ukraine was preparing too. Engineers rerouted energy networks. Radar crews adjusted detection algorithms to anticipate decoy drones. EW units deployed new countermeasures that disrupted Shahed navigation systems. In several regions, Ukraine even set up fake target zones, empty fields rigged with heat sources and reflectors to lure incoming drones away from populated areas. The war had entered a technological duel, fought across wavelengths and circuitry as much as trenches and artillery. By midnight, air raid sirens echoed again across central Ukraine. Even before the first explosion, commanders understood. This winter would be defined not by territorial gains, but by endurance. Russia's strategy was to break the rhythm of daily life, to grind down resilience, to turn energy into a weapon of war. But as the smoke rose over Ukrainian cities, one truth was clear. This was not the story of a country collapsing. It was the story of a country refusing to fall. And in the darkness of December, Ukraine's resistance became its strongest light.